I think I'm going to change my talk around a little bit because I realise it's probably a bit too long. So I think I'll leave out my life a bit, but I'll just tell you a little bit about me. I actually am a father. This isn't my first marriage. I got married when I was 21, and shortly after I was ordained, I had a daughter in 1975, and then I had another daughter in 1973, before I became a Buddhist actually, and then I had another daughter in 1975. And both my daughters are in their late 40s. They both have 3 children each, so I've got 6 grandchildren, and the age range from 20 to 11 now. And so I've had a lot of contact over the years with the children, although when I got married, shortly after some years of being married in my late 20s, I mean, it was a long time when I was young, I decided that after I was an order member, there was a tension that built up that I think some of you have mentioned between the spiritual life and the family life. And I was a kind of pioneer, I suppose, in those days. And I ended up living at Padmaloka, and my family lived in Norwich. And gradually we kind of separated, although I've always been on good terms with their mother, who's also an order member as well. So it's been married to 2 order members now. And actually there was a 3rd wife as well, but we won't go there. Yeah, I lived in Padmaloka in Padmaloka for about 3 or 4 years. Then I went to Sweden. I set up a centre in Sweden, came back to Padmaloka, worked on the ordination team, and then moved to Birmingham, joined the College of Public Preceptors. I joined that before it ever existed, actually. Then I went to live in Manchester for about 7 years, where working with Vidyamala, establishing breathworks. So that's briefly. And then 5 years ago, we moved here, Vidyamala and I. Vidyamala and I never lived together we've been together for about 20 years, but we've been a couple that's been together but living apart until 5 years ago, when we decided we might as well live together because it was the only way we could afford to live. And then we discovered actually we decided to get married for various reasons anyway. Let's leave all that there, because I'm going to talk a bit about the Dharma, really, and family life. So, you know, there does seem to be a tension about it. And at the time of a lot of the teachings we get from the Buddha are aimed towards his monks, who are considered full-timers. And in my time as an order member, the ordination was sort of rejigged a little bit after I got ordained, from being an upasika, which means a lay follower of the Buddha, to being a dharmachari, which means a dharma farer, or one that travels in the dharma. And the point was that Bhante Sangharakshita, he said that he thought that order members were full-timers, whether you were with living in a family or in a retreat center, or in men's community in our case, and or women's community in women's case. And so we kind of created a sort of bit of a hybrid, I suppose, between a lay person and a monk. And but the dharmachari is a full-time life. So then the question arises is, can you live a full-time Buddhist life as a lay person, so to speak, and having all the demands and responsibilities of living in a family? So I think it's an interesting question to ask. I remember when I was working in the ordination process, which I did I lived at Padmaloka for about 12 years doing that, and it started with what's now the current process. I was involved in the founding of that with Subhuti. And for many years, people who had families, they often saw themselves as a bit like second class, because they couldn't get on retreats as much as others, they couldn't sort of practice as much as others, and so forth. And it did take them longer to get ordained usually, but quite a lot of them got ordained. And I just think things have changed. I hope at Padmaloka they don't I think they may take a lot more trouble now than we perhaps did to support people in family life. Most people seem to be needing to do that now, to either live with families or live as a kind of lay person with a job, full-time job, and so on. So I came across a sutta which says something quite interesting, and it might change the way you look at spiritual life a little bit. It's the Giha Sutta, spelled Gihi. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. It's in the Anuta, can't remember how you say the name now. Anyway, it's a sutta about the householder. So I'm just going to read the first and the last section. And there's the other bits in it. It's not a very long sutta, just 2 pages. And so just by way of introduction, this takes place with the householder, Anathapindika, talking to the Blessed One. So just read out the first chapter. Then Anathapindika, the householder, surrounded by about 500 lay followers, went to the Blessed One, and on arrival, having bowed down to him, sat to one side. So the Blessed One said to the Venerable Sariputra, Sariputra, when you know of a householder clothed in white, that he is restrained in terms of the 5 training rules, and that he obtains at will, without difficulty, without hardship, 4 pleasant mental abidings in the here and now, then if he wants, he may state about himself, hell is ended for me, animal wounds are ended for me, the state of the hungry ghost is ended for me, planes of deprivation, the bad destinations, the lower realms are ended. I am a stream winner, never again destined for the lower realms, certain heading for self-awakening. Actually, I just realized the last paragraph, it's more or less the same paragraph as the first one. But then he outlines these 4 abidings, and they are briefly the 5 rules of training. That's the precepts, of course. So in this case, it's where a disciple of the Noble One abstains from taking life, abstains from taking what's not given, from sexual misconduct, abstains from lying, abstains from distilled and fermented drinks that cause heedlessness. They're the 5 trainings. And then which there are 4 pleasant mental abidings in the here and now. And they are, I'm just looking to shorten this. One is where one is indeed the Blessed One is worthy of rightly self-awakened, consummate in clear knowing and conduct, well gone, an expert with regard to the cosmos, unexcelled trainer of people fit to be tamed, teacher of devas and human beings, awakened, blessed. This is the first pleasant mental abiding. So he's talking about someone who's quite developed here. Further, he is endowed with confidence in the Dharma, is well taught by the Blessed One, etc. And that's the second abiding. The third abiding is in the Sangha, and the 4th abiding is in he's endowed with the virtues that are appealing to the noble ones, untorn, unbroken, unspotted, unsplattered, liberated, praised by the observant, ungrasped but leading to concentration. This is the 4th pleasant mental abiding. These are the 4 pleasant mental abidings in the here and now that he obtains at will, without difficulty, without hardship. And then it goes on to say that he can become not enlightened actually, but at least a stream entrant. And that's what he says in the first chapter. Do you notice there's one thing that he doesn't talk about in those abidings or in the precepts? Anyone quickly? Guess?
Family?
Nope. It's to do with what you call practice.
Meditation.
Meditation, yeah, it doesn't mention meditation at all. So I just want to say something about that, that when Buddhism came to the West, do you know what people were most interested in?
Study?
No.
Is it meditation?
Yep. Yep. Sort of 100 years ago, and even today, it's the same thing in the West. People usually come to meditate to centers to learn meditation. I think that's true to say. I mean, it may have changed. I don't go to many centers these days, but I know a lot of people, you know, and I certainly was the same. I was interested in meditation. That's how I wasn't interested in Buddhism. I didn't know anything about Buddhism. I went to a meditation class, and then I went to a talk, and then I became a Buddhist in that order. So he doesn't mention meditation. So, you know, you were all, several of you were all talking about you don't have time to practice. Right? And I think what you meant by that, you haven't got time to meditate. And I think it's a really big mistake to think of practice as meditation, because it's only one aspect of meditation. It may surprise you to know that people probably, because of this sutta, people at the time of the Buddha didn't meditate very much. The monks did, but they were full-timers. You know, they spent most of their day sitting around not doing very much, and then most of the evenings meditating, maybe all through the night. And, you know, sometimes I think like Ben would have probably found it really boring because he didn't like, and I don't particularly like long meditation retreats. I find that meditating once, I usually have the luxury of being able to meditate for about an hour in the mornings, and I've done that most of my life. It's just become a habit. And but I've often found myself with my daughters and family not being able to meditate. But and I find it rather sort of a bit of a put down when people say that if you're not meditating, you're not practicing. Because I actually think of myself as a full-time Buddhist. And I would like to invite you all to reframe your idea of practice. That it doesn't have to be about meditation. Why do you meditate? Why do people meditate? Have you actually thought about this? And I haven't got time to ask you all, because this is only supposed to be a 20-minute talk, and you can ask some questions. I'll tell you what I think, and you might think I'm wrong. But my understanding is one meditates to learn how to work on the mind, to develop mindfulness, but primarily to clear the mind of all the rubbish and all the chatter and things that's going on in the mind, so that you can really reflect on reality. Well, if you take that training and just see it as actually, well, all you're doing when you meditate is to train the minds to become more mindful and to be able to reflect, then you don't need to meditate for very long. Of course, if you enjoy meditation because it gives you time to sit down and do nothing for a little while, because you're all fathers and you don't want to feel bad about yourselves and things like that, it gives you relief from all these things, then you might actually discover that you actually don't meditate very much. You might sit there just thinking. And I would say that's what happened to me for the first 12 years of my life. I think my meditation was basically for like probably about half an hour thinking, and then maybe about 20 minutes actually making an effort to become focused and concentrated. And at Breathworks, we discovered that people, if they do 10 minutes meditation a day, that actually makes an enormous difference to their lives. So it's, if you can fit in 10 minutes, I know even if you live a busy life, fitting in 10 minutes is really difficult, but, it's doable. It's certainly more doable than doing 40 minutes. And, but even if you can't meditate, but you can get away on retreat occasionally, that's a good time to really get to grips with working on your mind in that sort of way, that formal, watching what's going on with your mind or using your imagination and developing your mind in that way is very, very powerful. But given that your fathers, and most of you, it seems, don't have a lot of time to meditate, apart from Paul, maybe some of the others, I didn't quite catch how much meditation you're doing. Vishankar can meditate. Well, at least you can sit on cushions. I don't know if you meditate, but you can sit on cushions for long periods of time. So what you may have to do is forget about the meditation quite a lot of the time, and don't give yourself a hard time about it. Don't think you're not practicing. But what I learned from Bhante, particularly, and from this sutta, that if you practice the 5 trainings, like you're really working on the precepts. I was talking to a couple of old friends of mine. I ordained them actually 26 years ago. And I asked them what they expected to do with the rest of their life as a Buddhist. And their answer was to cease to do evil and learn to do good, I suppose. It was actually practicing the precepts. They weren't thinking about getting enlightened, but they were actually wanted to live skillfully, you know, not doing harm, helping people, being kind, and keeping the precepts. So that was the first thing that the Buddha mentioned. Bearing in mind, I suppose, the Buddha, keeping in mind the Buddha and what the Buddha stands for is another reflection to do while you're a Buddhist. And, you know, I see that some of you have got shrines and things like that. So these are ways of remembering the Buddha. Listening to talks if you have the time, you know, if you have to travel and you can do that, traveling. A lot of these things you have to fit in around all the other things you're doing. But I know for a fact, a lot of people learn about the Dharma from listening to talks while they're traveling to work. Of course, if you've lost that opportunity, so poor you, you can go for walks or something. But I sometimes do that, go for a walk and listen to a talk. And that's another way you can do it. And meeting like this, if you can't get to a center, is probably about the best you can for Sangha, you know, being with people. Again, if you listen to talks, that's a sort of with more experienced people. You know, people like Padmavajra give wonderful talks, and numerous other people. You're having experience of Sangha, and so you cover like 3 of the 4 abidings. And then there's the kind of, I can't remember what the 4th one was the, I think it's really the reflection. It's the way that you're going to break through being kind of overly attached to your particular way of life that allows you to see things more clearly. And so that's what you have to do, guys. So is that good news? Like you don't have to sort of worry about it anymore. And yes, there will be a tension because Sam asked me at the end at the end of this meeting to recite to you, or to get us to recite, the transference of merits. Do you know what the transference of merits is? Does anyone know? Well, I tell you again because I haven't got time to ask you. It's actually more like taking the Bodhisattva vow. So when you transfer merits, you're not just giving away something that you don't even completely understand what it is you're giving away. What you're actually saying is, I want to act like a Bodhisattva. I don't want to just take whatever I get and keep it for myself. I want to give it to others. So yes, there will be a tension to how you do that. You know, that you may have this longing desire to teach other people the Dharma. This is something also that the Buddha encouraged householders to do, is to spread, you know, when he talks about in this sutta about the Dharma, is actually making it available for other people. So, you know, it's there are ways of doing it, as we're finding now, more helpful ways when we're unable to travel to centres and so on, which takes quite a lot of time doing that sort of thing. So yeah, if you can get to centres, obviously that's the best place to go and do all these things. You get all 4 of them in one. You don't get a lot of reflection. And quite honestly, in my experience at centres, when I've been to centres, the whole part of reflection seems to get a little bit left out. It becomes a bit formal. So you might hear people talk about doing insight practices. But what I learned from Bhante was to reflect all the time. So, you know, you're changing your baby's bottom, you can reflect on what it is you're doing. You know, there's shit there. There's a little being that needs someone. Their shit needs to be disposed of, and you're feeding them later. There's a whole kind of process that's going on. It's called life, where food comes in and shit goes out. Excuse my language, but kind of highlights the the reality of it. That's life. That's reality. Sitting in a cafe and relaxing, and then watching people go by, wondering what they're doing with their lives. What am I doing with my life? That's reflecting. You don't have to do it for a long time. Sometimes it's too challenging to do because it's almost frightening. You think you're not really doing very much with your life. But if you're spending time like that, you are reflecting. I often say to people as a kind of confession, but actually it's not really a confession. But I think because I have this sort of role that I feel I have to live up to, that I kind of confess that I like reading books, usually sort of thrillers. And I can't stand reading Buddhist books anymore. I mean, I can just about read Buddhist books. I can't read anything that's a commentary. I like things like In Love with the World. If you haven't read that, you should. It's by Nyingma Rinpoche. And it's a kind of autobiographical thing. But what I've discovered that reading particularly good literature, but even if I read thrillers, I always have something to reflect on. And I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night reflecting on it, which isn't a great thing to do, but it happens. But I've taught myself to reflect on everything, basically. I look at the news, I see all these pictures of Afghanistan, and I reflect on war and human beings and war. And it's sort of like, you realize, war doesn't, it just comes all the time. People are dying all the time in awful situations, etc., etc. You can reflect on this, you can reflect on what human life is. So there's really a lot you can be doing as lay Buddhists, so to speak, or fathers. And there will be this tension because it's basically the tension is self-made. You make your own tension. You think you ought to be doing something else, and then there's another part of you's got demands, other people got demands, and you kind of feel, this terrible. And I experienced it. It kind of depressed me in a way. That's why I had to move to Papaloka. I couldn't stand it. This tension between feeling I needed to teach the Dharma and spread the Dharma, and practice and really meditate a lot on things, and be a family man with all the things that that necessitated. In later life, I wouldn't encourage anyone to do what I did, is leave the family and go off and do it, because hey, I'm back as a householder, married again with a house which needs maintenance and various other things. It doesn't need very much, but it's still a householder, and I still practice, and I think my practice is very effective. So basically, better stop there because I could go on talking about this, but basically, there's so much you can do. You've all got to look after people. You've all got children, and they demand, whether they're grown up or not, they demand something of you. Even Darren, who's got an issue with where his child is and sorting out that relationship, if you can do it in a way that's caring towards both the mother and the child, but also gives you the what your needs, meets what your needs are, you'll find a way through it. And so that's all about practicing the precepts. So you've got things that challenge your patience, challenge your kind of loving care for people, challenging your own need for resourcing yourself, because you have to sometimes set boundaries, and that can be really hard when you've got a family. Particularly, sometimes it's impossible with small kids, but when the kids get older, I can guarantee, when they get into their late 40s, they've still got demands, and they still have disappointments. So you don't phone that. Nowadays, young people expect the father and mother to phone them up, not the other way around. When I was young, it was the other way around. You looked after your parents, and I'm still kind of expected to make the moves, go and visit them. They very rarely come and visit me, and so on. And so it's all changing. And then, if you've got children, you probably end up having grandchildren at some point. So it never ends. So just get used to it, suck it up and practice, and feel good about it.